Okay, we're going live on YouTube. And as soon as I get that set, we'll start recording.
Here's Gianna.
We'll do roll call.
Okay. All right. Okay, in the nick of time.
That's how I like it.
All right.
You know.
Okay, we're going to call to order the City of Philomath Planning Commission meeting and public hearing. And can we begin with a roll call?
Gianna Bernardini.
Here.
Ann Hunsaker.
Here.
Darlene Rose.
Here.
Peggy Yoder.
Here.
Mary Connor.
Here.
And if you give me just one moment, Joe Sullivan is just signing in. Roll call, Joe Sullivan.
Here.
All right. So our first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes. We have 3 to deal with. April 5th. Are there any comments on that?
I received no comments on the minutes.
Okay,
I do have a comment. If we're going to bundle all of the minutes together, like it was suggested, or if we're gonna have them individual months, I will be voting no on this month because there is no video, no closed captions, and the minutes apparently were being worked on a month and a half after the meeting. So I, for one, have to go back and look and see what it was I said a month and a half or 2 months before.
so which one are you,
I'm on talking about the April 5th.
April 5th?
Yeah. I would have a no on that one. The other ones, I would just like to make a comment, but it depends on if we're going to, are you keeping them individual?
I was gonna do
Okay.
it one at a time.
Okay.
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve the April 5th minutes as presented.
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? So May 3rd, revised.
One additional correction for May 3rd. On page 2, line 19. It should refer to section 3.7, not 3.6.
I'll make a motion that we approve that as, is that amended? Corrected.
I have another correction.
I have a correction.
Well,
I spoke.
he made a motion, somebody can second, and then we can discuss.
Okay.
Or not
Or
second.
not.
I second.
Oh, okay.
Okay, discussion. Yes.
Lines 12 through 16 on page 5. Actually, specifically on page 5, it's 16 and 17. Those are city council's names.
Thank you.
Still,
And
Good catch.
I don't know how this would be handled, but the action on 18 on page 5, the wording is not reflected in the new draft, so it would probably be discussed when we discuss the draft.
I'm not following your comment about the minutes.
On page 5,
Mhm.
1 through 4,
Oh, action 18.
That's
not
what
line
we-
18. Got it.
we voted on unanimously, but it did not get reflected into the new draft, the new wording. It's the old wording.
We can talk about that
When we do the draft,
when we do the
okay.
draft. if you agree with the minutes as they are.
Yes, other than that correction that I just noted.
Yes.
And did everybody here, do we know that they voted for it?
The one that I just said on the action line of 18?
Yeah.
Yes, we do have a video of that one, so I did rewatch it to make sure that it
And
was
it was
unanimous.
7-0,
It was 7-0, yeah.
so it would reflect all the commissioners.
So we just need to correct the names on lines 16 and 17.
Yes. At least that's
That was
what I
the
can-
same correction I was going to note.
All right. All right. Okay, I think we can say that correction.
Yeah,
By consent.
I'm good with it.
Yeah.
That's-
So-
That's correct.
All in favor of approving the minutes from May 3rd? Aye.
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 It's unanimous. And now, May 16th.
I have two corrections on May 16th. Page 2, line 45. Should say amend action number 1 to add policy 2.1. And the second correction is on page 4, line 3, to add commissioner and other building.
Any other comments?
Why? Why is that not correct? Because,
Because everywhere else I refer to the commissioner, and there I just have your, I don't have your title. It's not uniform.
oh,
and
making
it's-
motion, I see. Thank you.
John, did you have something?
Yeah, this is just me, but I couldn't find in these minutes where we came down on the wording of policy 2.1. The thing about requiring. I know we talked about it and I liked how the discussion was noted, but I didn't see a place as far as an action where that was actually decided. Does that make sense?
Which line are you talking about, John?
I guess it would be, well, from the top of page 2 of 5. That whole discussion around requiring.
Oh,
Okay, and then down on line 31, it says whether to amend the wording of policy 2.1. But I don't
If
see,
you look at page 3,
starting
on line 24, the discussion
right,
about requiring, and then go to page 4,
right.
action number 4 was made to the greatest extent possible.
Is that what that was referring to? Actually, I guess it's because I don't have I need a copy of the previous thing to compare it to, so I guess maybe that's what that's referring to.
yeah, without looking at the other one.
Action number 5 and action number 6 both relate to that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Hearing nothing else, all in favor of approving the minutes as amended?
Aye.
No, there was no motion. I just asked for a vote. There's some things I can do that on. I forget which they are.
So just try.
Okay.
So
The Roberts Rules Police are coming.
No, well, Ruth objected, so she's not a commissioner though. For her sake, we can just redo that real quick.
I'll make a motion that we approve the May 16th minutes as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
Thank you.
And that brings us to our public hearing. The case title is PC 22-04, updated City of Philomath Comprehensive Plan, Chapter 2, Economy. In 2020, the city began preparations to update major portions of the comprehensive plan by drafting and adopting an economic opportunities analysis as an addendum to the comprehensive plan. The Planning Commission reviewed the current economic policies proposed in the economic opportunities analysis, and samples from other cities over the past couple of months, and has put together new language for this chapter. So tonight's order of proceedings will be starting with a staff report, and then is there any public to provide testimony?
I've not received any requests to provide testimony, so we'll just need to open the public hearing and call out each of the segments.
Okay.
And we'll just go back to them.
Okay. And then we'll have the opportunity to ask questions of staff, deliberate, and then make final recommendations. Persons testifying either orally or in writing may request a continuance or request the record be held open. These requests should be included in your testimony. The public hearing is now open. Mr. Workman, you have a staff report.
So staff report is attachment C.
Oh.
in the
Can I ask you to pause?
Sure.
I got ahead of myself again. Do any commissioners wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest? Hearing none, does anyone wish to rebut the lack of disclosure of a conflict of interest? Are there any objections on jurisdictional grounds, meaning that the Planning Commission is not the appropriate body for this hearing? Land use decisions such as this case under consideration this evening are evaluated against applicable statewide planning goals and guidelines and criteria from the Land Development Code and Comprehensive Plan as presented in the staff report. Now,
Q staff report. Staff report is attachment C to the agenda item summary in your meeting packet. Primarily what we're looking at from the land use planning approval process is the criteria for amending the current comprehensive plan. We don't, when the city is the applicant, like in this instance, we don't typically do a pre-application conference like we require with others. We don't typically do a formal application process. We just work through the Planning Commission to get the process rolling. When we look at actual findings, looking at the decision-making considerations, so I'm on the bottom page 1, decision-making considerations. These recommendations from the Planning Commission tonight to the City Council will be based on the following. Number 1 is the statewide planning goals and guidelines adopted under Oregon revised statutes. We've taken a look at ORS 197-610, and we've actually looked at that. If you recall, the first meeting of the Planning Commission, that was included in the packet of all of the requirements from the state for economic chapter. And the finding is that proper notice was given to DLCD and that the city meets these recommended policies meet the requirements that the state has in their land use planning goals for the economy. The second criteria is comments from any applicable federal or state agencies. We did not receive any comments from DLCD or any other state or federal agency. Number 3 is any applicable intergovernmental agencies. We did not receive any comments from any other intergovernmental agency. And then number 4 is any applicable comprehensive plan policies and provisions of the code that implement the comprehensive plan. Now, we looked at 18105 already in the code, essentially because we're reviewing the entire economy chapter with this new chapter. The current economy chapters, although we note them, we're not really comparing like these were all the ones before and here's how they revolve over or kind of roll over into the new ones. We're just setting new policies based on the economic opportunities analysis that was completed. But we do look at chapter 1, citizen involvement policies that were recently updated. Based on those policies and citizen involvement, staff report finds that the public hearings that were held, including this public hearing and the public hearing that will be held before the city council next month, meet the requirements that we have in the citizen involvement chapter of our comprehensive plan. So conclusion is that the proposed amendments to chapter 2, the economy of the Philomath comprehensive plan, meet the criteria set by the Philomath Municipal Code, Oregon State Statute, and the comprehensive plan itself. Conclude my report.
Are there any questions of staff at this time? We can now have public testimony if there's anyone wishing to speak. I do not believe there are any. There have not been any requests to hold the record open or for continuance, including all of you. The public hearing is now closed. And I guess I'll ask again, does anybody have any questions of staff? Maybe not about the content of the staff report, but maybe what's here before we get into the meat of it.
Might want to get a motion on the table and we can make any amendments.
Well, since it's Councillor Causey, I'll let her go first since she's not going to make a motion anyway.
No, I'm not. I just have a question about policy 3.3 on page 3 of 4. It appears to
Build
be,
suspense.
what?
Build suspense.
It appears to be incomplete.
Yes.
Should say residents. That's what it was before. Just one more word,
Yeah.
visitors and residents.
Well, if somebody doesn't have any large overarching policy, procedure, or content issues, we could have a motion to adopt and then talk about details and amendments.
The recommended motion is on the bottom or the back of the end of the staff report. Or not the staff report, the agenda item summary. So
I'll move that the planning commission adopt the findings presented in the staff report dated 6/15/2022, PC 22-04 to amend the comprehensive plan and recommend an amending ordinance be considered and approved by the city council.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. So now deliberations, which can also just be comments. Do we want to just go page by page?
I like it that way. Go page by page.
Okay. Anything in the overview? For the rest of page 1. Context. Okay. Page 2, goal 1, land supply and infrastructure.
I don't know if spacing is actually, spacing will probably correct itself.
Oh, between 50 and 51.
Between, yeah, 50 and 51, there should be a space. It's just,
Oh, I see.
yeah. It'll probably be corrected.
Since we're not sure, we might, and the lines are numbered, we might as well just make a motion to add that additional paragraph spacage to create a blank line between the current 50 and 51. Because we can't guarantee that whoever is publishing the code online will catch that to go and make that space.
Okay, so I move that we add a space between, on page 2, between line 50 and 51.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous.
I'm sorry. Who's seconded the motion? Oh, thank you.
Nothing on goal 1, goal 2. Development, infill, and redevelopment. Goal 3, somebody can make a motion. Residents. Like
Oh.
127.
Oh, we need that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I'll do 2 things at once.
Go for it.
Down there, line 39, it's Benton County Historical Museum. I think we need to make that right. So
Okay.
I'll make a motion that on page 3, goal 3, line 27, add
127.
127, add residents, and on line 39, add, or for it to read historical, otherwise add an AL.
I second that.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Again, you.
I make a motion
Yeah.
to substitute the verbiage that is on page 3, lines 138 through 140, to have it match the vote and approval from our meeting date from May 3rd.
Okay.
So it will read on line 38, or other attractions, i.e. supporting improvements at Skirvin Park, parentheses, home of Philomath Frolic and Rodeo, parentheses, City Park and the Benton County Historical Museum, etc., and promoting events and nearby recreational opportunities.
Can you read that one more time, please?
Yes, on page 5 of the minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just thinking the wording.
Okay, the wording will be the whole 136 through 143, policy 3.6 will read, support growth of tourism in Philomath and encourage pass-through travelers to stop in Philomath by encouraging a strong downtown retail environment, developing plazas or other attractions, supporting improvements at Skirvin Park, parentheses, home of Philomath Frolic and Rodeo, comma, City Park and the Benton County Historical Museum, etc., and promoting events and nearby recreational opportunities.
That second time you read it, I didn't hear you say IE, but the first time I thought you said IE.
Okay, the wording from the minutes that we had in May, it's actually written down and it has an IE.
Okay, so you
And
left it out.
we made a motion, we've all voted on it, so I'm assuming that we should keep the IE in there.
You just skipped it the second time. you read
Okay.
it. Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Is there any discussion on that motion? Any concerns, any comments? Okay,
I think I just had different notes than what Ruth had captured in all the discussion, so
Yeah.
apologize if I didn't get that word for word.
Okay.
I will though, in reading, I'll just put on the table. I remember one of the conversations was about supporting improvements to Skirvin Park makes sense and City Park makes sense, but the Benton County Historical Museum isn't owned by the city, and so we can, I don't know how we support improvements other than with a letter of support or something like that. So I think it's okay. It's just, we don't really have a direct way to encourage or to make improvements to the Benton County Historical Museum property.
Well, and at the meeting where we were discussing this, almost ad nauseum, was Counselor Causey did ask, are we dictating or, that we're going to be making improvements? And, we're not.
support.
It's whether or not we support what improvements.
I understand what you're saying, but I think even let them know that we support
Yeah.
them improving things.
Yeah.
Worthwhile.
The concepts of, I think that's just matter. My notes didn't line up exactly with
Yeah.
what was said.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor? Aye. Unanimous?
I have one thing on this policy 3.7. I couldn't figure it out, but I didn't even think to look at what we said in a minute. But it seemed like in my mind anyway, whatever we did, we didn't do specifically that, but maybe we did. I looked at my notes and I didn't have what it said, or what I had in my notes didn't make sense either, but I don't.
You mean line 142?
I thought this
Joseph?
came from Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, it was, yeah. He could probably speak to that.
Oh, is that what you had said?
Do you mind repeating the question again? And the line?
Well, I was questioning policy 3.7. Is that what we agreed to? And I guess Peggy's saying that it came through you.
Yeah, I did have I don't think that's, these things kind of morph.
Yeah.
So I don't think that, what I was originally going for is the idea that we would support tax incentives that would attract businesses specifically tied to job creation. So like if a business was going to offer, we're going to create 30 jobs and they're not blowing smoke, they're real serious about this, then we might be able to say, okay, fine. If you build something here, have some, high paying jobs and there's really 30 of them or whatever, that yeah, we'll give you no taxes for a few years. And the idea is, of course, once you have a business that moves to an area and they hire like 30 employees, they can't move easily. They're here and then we get the tax money back in year 4 or 5 or, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So that is for you, that is.
You don't feel
Makes
like
sense
anything's
then.
missing.
Right.
Yeah, well, the tax incentives I was going for here were specifically for incoming businesses to support businesses moving to the area. So it probably could benefit from some sort of language just specifying that it's not these aren't tax incentives for like, I don't know what, some random application. They're to get incentivized businesses moving to the area.
Oh, but wouldn't it be good to incentivize a business to grow that was making a decision to either grow here or grow somewhere else?
Yeah, it really would be. The thing is, I guess I feel like two things. First, I know there's a lot of precedent for governments offering incentives to new businesses relocating to their area. It's just something that's done. And second is, I have businesses in the area, and if I suggest we give tax incentives to growing businesses, then I'm kind of in a conflict of interest sort of situation. And so since my business is already in the area, I can freely suggest we support moving businesses because it's not going to affect me one way or the other.
Sure.
So just to put that at ease, the city council just considered the formation of the enterprise zone, which is a state program, which essentially gives a 3, 4, or 5-year tax abatement to new or existing businesses that are creating new jobs. And so it's essentially this, but it is not limited to new businesses coming to the area. It's any business that's going to create new jobs in the area. So the city council's already approved this. I actually cited, in part of that conversation, I cited this proposed language that was coming from the Planning Commission. And city council took that in advisement of, this is a future policy we're looking to have as some type of tax incentive for, job creating businesses. But it didn't specify new businesses only, it was for all businesses. And the city council's already approved that, and we're applying to the state to finalize it. So within the month or so, that'll be in place. So I think, to relieve Commissioner Sullivan's concern about supporting his own business is already here, the city council's already taken action on this. So whether we include that language or not, I think is.
And I'm very good with generic language that's non-specific, because every time we come up with a new program, it's going to be heavily scrutinized and debated and discussed and approved by the city council. So
I don't have any concerns with the language as it's printed here.
Okay.
And I'll just finalize my preference is actually to help grow existing businesses more than try to spend a lot of money and entice new businesses to come to town. I'd much rather spend my time with existing businesses that are wanting to grow. So I think leaving it not restricted to only new businesses actually helps the city. It can be my preference.
Okay. That addressed my concern.
well, that leaves us only with 4 more lines of.
Councilor Causey has a comment.
Oh, Councilor Causey.
I just wanted to clarify that the enterprise zone incentives do not apply to retail businesses.
It'd be industrial.
Yes, industrial manufacturing.
Yeah.
It does include hotel and resort properties, but it does not include retail.
So anything on goal 4, workforce development? Okay. Any other comments before we vote? That felt too easy.
We
I guess-
discussed it a
I guess we
lot.
I
paid
was
our
gonna
dues.
say.
Yeah.
We already paid our
We've done our
dues.
time.
All right. All in favor of approval of the economy chapter, chapter 2, as amended
With corrections?
with corrections? Favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you all. Unanimous again. Because the Planning Commission's recommendation is not a decision, it cannot be appealed. The Planning Commission's recommendation will be considered by the City Council in a subsequently noticed public hearing on July 11th, 2022. Is that still the correct date?
That is still the correct date. At 7 o'clock.
Thank you all very much. The next item of business is the downtown revitalization plan that we all got nicely printed and bound documents in our packets, and the document is on the website, city website. So what sort of discussion are we going to have today?
So I want to go through it a little bit if we've got some time. I won't go into a lot of detail, but just want to cover the basis of where this document came from, speak to some of the highlights, and then answer any questions that you have. I will just say the city council had a work session on this earlier this month. We got maybe halfway through it, 3/4 of the way through it. We got through the nuts and bolts, and then when we got to the exciting part about all of the new stuff, it was like, oh, time to end. So the city council will be revisiting this, but I do think it's wholly appropriate to bring this to the Planning Commission as well. fact, we'd even debated between having a joint meeting between planning commission, city council, but this time of year, that's problematic, holding multiple meetings. So just take a little bit of time with you this evening to walk you through this. Fully anticipate that you've not had time to read it in its entirely, being that you've only had it for a few days now. So let me just hit highlights so I can answer questions along the way. And we will be coming back and revisiting this document in the future. This area-wide plan, let me just I'm going to skip through executive summary just because if not, I end up repeating myself.
Could I ask a question real quick at the end?
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and I apologize. Maybe you guys know the answer to this, and I've just been oblivious or something like that. But I remember a bunch of different initiatives, right? We've been working on some downtown stuff. I forget what it was called. It was streetscapes, right? There were streetscapes. We've had a couple meetings with Pat, last year where he's had different code changes he wanted. There's a bunch of different initiatives. I did not expect to see this document, and the title did not seem familiar to me. Can you just plug this in terms of context, where this came from, and jog my memory a little bit?
Yeah, so let's start there. So I'm on page 12, kind of after the section 1.1 project introduction and objectives. I'll just cruise through a couple of these real quick because it'll answer your question. City of Philomath completed the area-wide plan, revitalization study to define a vision and action plan to support brownfield revitalization and enhance vitality in downtown by focusing on redevelopment. Skipping down to the bottom of that paragraph, this project was funded as part of the Corvallis Area Coalition from the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the APA. It's the Brownfield Coalition Assessment Grant Project, and the City of Philomath was an active coalition member. So this was an effort by City of Albany, City of Corvallis, Benton County, Philomath, and Monroe. We pulled together, we applied for this grant through the APA. We were granted $600,000 to do phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessments on either public or privately owned property to help them kind of get over that hurdle of knowing what was in the ground. But that grant also paid for revitalization studies, similar to one that we did on Landmark Drive, the Harts, when they owned that property. They were given some funding to have Stantec, was the same company that did the study up on North Landmark Drive. That property has since sold and is under plans for development. And then we also were the city applied for funding to do this area-wide plan for the downtown area, because streetscapes and Main Street, all these other things were going on. The focus really of this project, Commissioner Sullivan, was on the city-owned property at Main and 14th. But because we're only one property owner removed from the pollutant of that property alone wasn't eligible for this grant money to do like a phase 1, phase 2 environmental assessment or do any type of redevelopment strategy. But we were eligible to do an area-wide plan, which could include that city property in addition to the rest of the downtown. So we looked at a larger, more encompassing project area from 14th and Main down to the gun store. Had just recently gone out of business and was an empty lot up for sale at the time. So we kind of expanded that whole corridor and contracted with Stantec to look at this area and look at how do we redevelop this downtown area? How do we re-energize and reinvigorate the downtown area, knowing that we've got some brownfield areas, which the state defined brownfields pretty loosely, right? It's any property that's being underutilized due to any number of inhabitants, right? Could be environmental, could be, different types of constraints on the properties. Any reason for it to not be developing to its full potential. And in Philomath downtown area, we've got several of those types of areas. So it qualified, we applied, it qualified, we were given the grant to go ahead and contract with Stantec to do this work for us. So that was kind of where it stemmed from. Not a real heavy lift on the staff side. Stantec did some outreach. There were some surveys that went out. There were a couple of public meetings that were held. Yeah, it's kind of how we landed here. Does that help answer, Commissioner Sullivan, kind of where we got to where we are?
Yes, it does. I remember when the city purchased that property, and at first, I remember we asked some questions about it. And at the time, the city was under contract with the seller or something, and the answer was, we can't talk about it. And then the city did buy it, and then I heard that the council was going to turn it into a parking lot, which kind of surprised me at first. And I thought, well, maybe they're trying to provide parking for people to visit downtown areas. This program sounds like a great way to help the city develop not just that lot, but kind of the whole area into something nicer. Great thing. Why did the city purchase that lot? And what's the long-term plan for that thing? Not to go too far afield, but it seems like it's an integral part of the whole thing.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So it was actually the city urban renewal agency that purchased that lot. So it was urban renewal funds that purchased that lot because the city's urban renewal plan, in addition to identifying the streetscape, downtown safety and streetscape project, it also identified the need for off-street parking to support the downtown area and that area. And so when that lot was still for sale, it was under that provision that I approached the urban renewal agency and requested that we move forward and purchase that property as a property identified in the urban renewal plan for off-street parking of some sort. Now, I would argue, I don't know that we're tied to 100% of that property has to just be asphalt, right? But we do have some restrictions there where, and again, who's going to challenge it? What attorney is going to step forward and what land use planner is going to raise the issue? But, the stewardship of that property it was purchased by urban renewal with the intent to do some off-street public parking there. And then this plan and the heavier look was, okay, if that's the intent, what really can we do with that property in addition to the rest of the properties downtown to help encourage more development? The bigger picture.
That's enormously helpful.
Yeah, the bigger picture, Commissioner Sullivan, is we know that because the first time the city tried to buy that property, we did a phase 1 and phase 2 environmental assessment. We know that there's underground storage tanks. We know that there's some leakage. We know that some of that leakage is expanded out into the public right of way there on 14th Street. We know there's a hydraulic lift there. We know there's some leakage there. So we kind of know what contaminants are there. In order for us to apply to the EPA or for DEQ for some cleanup funds, one of the first questions I ask is, well, what is your redevelopment plan? What are you going to do with the site? And we didn't really have a plan other than say, well, urban renewal plan says parking lot, but we really hadn't fully looked at it. The hope was this project, this plan would help facilitate that discussion and that the city council would be able to come to an agreement on what we're going to do with that property so that we can go ahead and apply for those DEQ grants and do the cleanup funding. So we've kind of been sitting on the property for about a year and a half now, kind of working through this project so that we could have a better answer to those questions as we're applying for grant funds to clean up the site. So, but again, we didn't just focus on that site because it wasn't eligible because we just purchased it. We had to do a larger area, including that site.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. If it happened to get a bunch of trees on it and then the parking part turned into a parking lot for like farmers market and food trucks, it seems like it'd be a really attractive venue for that kind of thing. But it's my 2 cents.
Yep, everybody's putting in their 2 cents.
And yeah, there were a couple of public meetings on it, and there were a lot of suggestions about what to do with that property. Councilor Cuddy.
Thank you. I would just note that on page 92, it outlines different options for that property.
Yeah.
So since we're all there, because again, that really is kind of the focus. So there's a lot between there and page 92, but let's go ahead and just talk on that property a little bit. So 3 options. This is coming from Stantec, and you can read I'll summarize the first 2 paragraphs. Basically, there was a survey that went out. It wasn't, we didn't have a huge response. We didn't get the 880 responses like the Park Master Plan got, right? I think there was like 35, 40 responses to the survey that went out. And it was out for a month and a half. I think people it was hard to grasp what the survey was really about. So people just didn't really engage with it, right? It's like, some city-owned property, no big deal. So it was hard to engage, but we did get about 40 respondents. We also had 2 public meetings. The public meetings, again, to be fully transparent, were mostly city council members, their spouses, some planning commissioners and some spouses, a few members of the general public that had some interest and showed up. I think we had 1 or 2 business owners that came as well.
Realtors.
A few realtors that came, right? So again, not a real diverse kind of spread of the community, but there was some public involvement, and Stantec recognized that, right? And so they're looking, okay, we got some public input, and then they really relied back on kind of their best practices and their experience and what they've seen in other communities. And they came up with these 3 options, right? So just take that what you will for kind of background. There wasn't this overwhelming flood of, information that came to Stantec saying this is what the community wants. There's kind of 3 basic options. The first is this mixed use project. It's kind of identified on the bottom left page of, or corner of page 93, where you've got a multi-use infill building, ground level for visitor type services. So they talk about having maybe the visitor center, the Chamber of Commerce / visitor center, some public restrooms there, and then some leasable space for more like a retail customer service type area. The intent is that would mimic what this image doesn't show is right across the street. You kind of have that already, right? Where you've got buildings right up against the street. They don't have the parking lots there. So the intent would be to have this section of 14th Street mimic the other side of the street with the businesses right up against the road with 0 lot line setback. And so as you hit 14th Street, you really feel like you're coming into that downtown because you've got now businesses on both sides of the road and you're coming there. And so that was what I was trying to duplicate. Adding the parking in the back, and then also a nod to the fact that a lot of people did say that we wanted kind of this event / meeting space for the food carts, event space, maybe a farmer's market area, all those types of things. So the intent was don't just pave it, do some type of pavers or brick or something that's going to make that area stand out as more of a plaza that would serve the community like evenings, weekends, that sort of it. But then during the week, it's going to serve for your visitor center and then your employment-based parking. To have that off-street parking and support downtown. So that's kind of option 1. Option 2 is just a strict public plaza visitor services. So this is talking about transferring the plaza to public plaza along Main Street, accommodate passive recreation, community events like the farmer's market, some type of smaller shelter with public restrooms, an informational kiosk, that sort of bit. Public parking could be introduced along the alley, along the southern boundary there. Option would create signature open space meeting the downtown core. So this is that downtown plaza concept that was pitched. And then option 3 is kind of step back and take a look at the neighboring properties and see if any of these concepts could be expanded. Looking at the property directly to the west, it's the acupuncture building there. Is there a way to expand what we're doing into that building? If you could envision the new building extending all the way over to Pioneer, and then maybe it could even house the acupuncture in a new building in a new space, for example. You've got Pioneer's parking to the south. Is it worth a conversation with Pioneer? See if you could incorporate that parking lot into also becoming some type of future, part of that future parking / plaza area, to where on the weekends and the evenings when Pioneer employees aren't parking there, it could be utilized for things like farmers markets and events and things. And so option 3 is really just, let's not pick 1 or 2 right now. Let's look at maybe bigger pictures of room to do more with a larger area than what we just have for just the city-owned lot there. Well, the 2 city-owned lots there. So those are the 3 options. Does anybody have any comments or strong feelings one way or another, or any other ideas that we can put out on the table? And again, we're not making decisions. We're just kind of generating ideas and brainstorming.
I think it's really exciting, and I did read through it today, which was my day. But as you go through here, there are a lot of places where they've listed the different kind of activities that we might consider for that, and definitely worth going through it. And I love the food truck idea, the plaza, it's in there. It's a good document, I think.
Jian?
I was just wondering, as far as that third option that you were talking about, is the acupuncture clinic, are they aware that?
We've not talked to them now. This is really very preliminary still.
It's on the website though. If I was the owner of the acupuncture place, I'd say, what? But
I agree with Darlene. I love this document. This gets me really excited. I'm like, oh my God, we could do so many super cool things. This could look so good. I will go on record right now as saying that I do not believe that a parking lot would be the city's greatest use of that piece of property. I
not with
second
the
that.
option of shared parking, then right next door would, I mean, that would just be ideal to make this piece of property.
Commissioner Solon?
Yeah, these all sound like great things, and sounds like there's no shortage of thoughts and ideas about this. Kind of looking at the tea leaves a little bit, I'm guessing nothing is going to happen until the tanks and things can get cleaned up, and that usually translates into money. And then whatever we do with it, whether it's building a building or making a parking lot, or maybe hopefully something that's a little bit greener, that's more money. If I had to just imagine, and I'm not really a great imaginer when it comes to like construction costs, but I'm guessing somewhere in the order of $1.5 million. Is that remotely close? And where would you put our chances at doing this, let's say in the next 5 years? I know just speculation here, but care to put a guess on it?
Part of this document, and I struggled with this with the city council a little bit, admittedly, there's so many projects in here. I really want to do an overview, and then we need to prioritize. And so, 14th and Main is problematic. I just got a letter from DEQ saying, hey, remember that cleanup on 14th and Main? We need to start taking care of that, right? And so DEQ is on us on this side. So, of all of the things in here, 14th and Main, I think, needs to be a priority for the city, at the very least, to get the cleanup done. And that cleanup is a little bit, guided by what it is we're gonna do with the property. So, if it's 3 years out or 5 years out, I do think that this is probably on the short list of projects to do. The city council did put some money, some of the ARPA money that we received aside for future community facing type projects. About $1 million went to infrastructure for sewer projects that nobody will ever see, but we'll all appreciate. But they did put some money aside for, again, community facing, kind of outward facing projects that the community can see and get the benefit of. To me, this, any improvements that we do here would qualify as those type of improvements. So there's some funding there. There's been chatter, I guess is the best word to say, about a potential for like a public-private partnership on this lot, where maybe the city owns the lot, but we would contract out for the building to be built, and maybe that would be privately owned, with a lease back or something like that. So it'd actually be a revenue generating property with a tenant with a building on top of it, which would help pay for maintaining downtown and emptying garbage cans and all of those other expenses that we're going to have coming on. So it may be $1.5 million, but it may not be the city's $1.5 million. It may be, again, a project that we can work with the private sector as well. But again, no conversations at this point. It's just ideas at this point.
Yeah. If I were to suggest something, and obviously I'm not, the city council or anything like that, it seems like the smartest thing the city could do towards prioritization, like you said, is by picking kind of the simplest, most cost-effective use that lends itself to potential other uses. If we told the EPA, yes, here's our plan, we are definitely going to put some pavers on it. They're going to be pavers that allow water to go through. We're going to plant a bunch of trees, and it's going to be a place for, I don't know, like it's at the farmer's market or something like that. We could always do that, clean it up, get it funded, and 5 or 10 years down the road, tear up some of the trees and put in a community center like that. But you can't really do the reverse, right? The community center is expensive, and you're never going to tear that down and then put in trees. So it seems like if I were the city and trying to allocate money, I would pick something kind of simple, beautiful, and that lends itself to pivoting in the future, depending on how things shake out.
Is it fair to say that there's nothing really prescriptive in this? It's just information and ideas, and that maybe most relevance to the planning commission is to inform our, what we're scheduled to be working on this fall, looking at zoning and those sorts of issues.
So I'm not allowed to ask a question about this?
No, I just asked mine first.
Okay.
I've been waiting a while.
But it seems like you were guiding us towards, okay, we're gonna close this down. I mean, it's a quick question.
No.
It's my fault, Peggy. I just keep, nah.
No, I know,
Sorry.
Joseph, you know, that's why you are. I was just wondering, because Joseph brought up, you know, that we've had streetscapes and Main Street Plan, of how all of this, does it match with all of those other ones that we've had? Or are they conflicting in any way, or they really are complementary to each other?
So a lot of the pages that we skip talk about transportation. There's sections in here that talk about, so Stantec was given the work that's been done on the Main Street Plan. They were given all of those before they started this. So it'll reference those documents. It mostly aligns to them or references them. They talk about like parking standards for the downtown area. That's directly citing from the Main Street Plan that Eco Northwest put together for us.
But it doesn't speak as if it's a fact. It says these are the things you could do when they kind of knew we were doing it.
Right. So no,
Just so they weren't coupled.
right. You'll see references to the Main Street Plan are in here. So again, they're aware that that's going on. They make reference to it. They take note of it. The one thing we didn't talk on is they do page or chapter 3 is kind of they do a bit of an analysis, I guess, if you will, of existing sites in that downtown area, and they score them based on how readily available they are to develop. So it's kind of trying to find the key properties that we should be looking at to develop first. This 14th and Main makes the top of the list. It's the highest score, if you will, or the lowest score, if you will. And so I think it's high score, 5s were high. So gets high score. And then it kind of lists other properties as well. But again, like the old gun shop in there, which is the new Philomath Emporium, it's on there as well. Well, it's been redeveloped. It's got a retail store in there, right? So is there room for additional development? Sure, there's an open space to the side, but maybe that doesn't rank up as high today as what it did when this was being written just a few months ago, because there's now a retail store in there, right? So all of this is a little bit in flux. I will say, Commissioner Connor, that at the end of this, it does get a little bit more prescriptive. There is an action plan, if you will, of implementation based on this. This is chapter 7 is implementation and action plan. And it helps try to serve as a guide for directing the city on priorities and things that Stantec viewed as easier things to do. Some of these are code revisions that could be made, some policy decisions that can be tweaked a little bit that will do that. So, from staff's perspective, we'll probably be looking at some of these short-term ones and looking to the city council on, hey, are some of these things that we want to take on, add into the strategic plan over the next year or 2 or 3, which of these we want to add in here and really focus in on. And then those are going to flow down back to the planning commissions. We're looking at what those improvements will look like and what those topics specifically, if there's zoning changes, code changes, all those types of things that we'll be looking at. The one comment that I made, just backing off that a little bit. So yeah, I would go through, if you haven't gone through chapter 7 yet, I actually found it was helpful just to go through the whole thing all at once. And then when you go back and read the project, then you'll see and read about these projects that were identified in the actual action plan. And that way, as you're reading it, kind of helps you prioritize, kind of thinking through it. But again, this is Stantec's recommendation, and we can vary from it. The one thing the one thing that I think it was my final statement to the city council at the work session that I wish I would have said earlier, and I'll say now, is there's at least 3 or 4, probably 4 recommendations in here for like community gathering spaces. We're not Bend, right? We're not Salem. We don't have 300,000 or 400,000, 500,000 people here. And so, I don't know, I would argue, I don't know that the city needs 4 or 5 downtown gathering spaces. Although there's recommendations for 3 or 4 in here, I think we pick one, and we say, this is going to be our gathering space downtown. And the other ones were great recommendations, but we can make use of those spaces for other things. We really want to focus in on what is going to be the downtown Philomath gathering space, where we're going to have the farmer's market, right? We don't need to have farmer's market in 4 spaces. We need to have it in one place. Where's the best place? Let's design a spot for that. right? If we want to have evening events and weekend events, and we have like the mayor's deal, where we have car shows and we have booths and we have a stage and we have that. Okay, what's the best place to put that? Is it behind the city buildings back here? Is it 13th Street? There's a whole section on 13th Street, improvements there. Is it the 14th and Main property that we own? And I'd argue, I don't think we need all three, right? Which would be a lot of money, and I just don't think would get utilized. So as a community, and we'll look to the city council to kind of lead this discussion, let's pick where the best places are for these types of things we want to have. And then let's just recognize that, yeah, you know, a plaza back behind City Hall and the police station could be really, really cool. But if that's not the best place to do it, then let's not do that and let's put it somewhere else. If that makes sense.
Is there some place on the website that shows exactly city-owned property, like the museum? We don't own the museum, but do we own the property at the museum? We don't own anything about the museum.
No, we own City Hall,
It's all
police
Benton County
library. We own the parks. We don't own any school property. We own South 9th Street where the treatment plant is. So, you know, just west of Marys River Park.
You own that lot anymore on the corner of 10?
No.
Oh.
We own a lot up on Industrial Way. That's a wetland mitigation site. So we don't own a lot of property. Some cities own lots of industrial land. They get stuck with a bunch of, you know, wetland areas or big park spots. The city of Philomath, we're not a large land owner. We've not gone out of our way in years past to purchase large swaths of land, nor have we had to foreclose on people and acquired property, which is how a lot of cities end up getting it, as it gets dumped on them.
Is there a place on the website?
Isn't it in the zoning map?
Just here?
Yeah, the zoning map's best. I mean, the green is public, but it includes
Okay.
school and city.
Okay.
But that's gonna be a pretty decent one, although the city, like I said, we own some industrial land up on North Industrial Way. There's not a lot. I could write them out for you.
For the downtown area on page 130 in the appendix, it's a list of tax lots and business owners, business names, which might give a little bit of a clue about the ownership.
Yeah, that's specific to downtown, yeah.
Specific to downtown,
Thank
right?
you.
Right.
Sure.
Yes. Commission.
I
No.
actually
Commissioner
haven't
Hunsaker.
read the whole thing, and I was really impressed with it. I understand that a lot of this has to do with money in terms of being actually able to do it, but your point of city, private, I think mostly it'd have to be mostly private. I like the vision of it in the sense that, I mean, in this area, the idea is to eventually build a downtown that is, you know, something similar across the street between 13th and 14th, or maybe even down 12th to 14th. But to literally build it, and I think they did do a good job of using the different information that's been developed. They talk about, you know, even to do with downtown housing in terms of in these new buildings that on the top floor you would have apartments. That, you know, so they've really looked at all that information, and I guess I feel like they have a good idea, you know, can it be done in the sense of who's going to do it, with, you know, what money and, you know, that kind of stuff. The last part of it, I guess my thought would be in your question about that one piece of city-owned property, I guess to kind of partly get to what I was just describing as far as who's going to do it type of a thing, is if the city was, like you said, possibly a city private partnership was to do like that one picture shows on page 93, is have build a building that's on the street kind of, this is the idea that we're looking for, so to speak, for the rest of the area, that also could, like I think what you described with the, maybe a visitor center or such in the back and have some shops on Main Street side. I think that would be a really good thing. And I think doing that with the option 3 with the redevelopment block, I mean, maybe don't report this, but I've always felt in terms of developing the downtown, we have so many businesses there that in a sense don't belong there because they're not commercial businesses. And that redevelopment part, if we ever could get Pioneer Telephone to move to an industrial site, consolidate their properties, because they have property out on 19th Street in that industrial park, and just do something totally different with that whole block. I mean, that would be I realize that that's talking millions of dollars and all that, so it may never could happen, but not picking on them, but there are other properties if you drive down Main Street to say, yeah, they don't really fit for a downtown. And I think in our zoning, we need part of that when we get to that is really be critical about what we allow to be businesses are allowed in the downtown in that area. Because I mean, they're good businesses. Obviously, Pioneer Telephone's a really important business in our community, but there's others that also are, but they're not where they should be. So that's my thoughts.
Yeah, I think your point's really well taken about looking at zoning and your allowed uses in your downtown core. And I think that is going to be a lift that we're going to look to the Planning Commission probably sooner than later, is when we're looking at the size of your downtown core. So that's our C1 is our downtown zoning, C1 commercial 1. Right now it's from 12th Street to 14th Street. And it goes a half a block north of the highway and a half a block south of the highway of Main Street. It doesn't even go all the way down to Applegate, right? So you have 2 blocks wide and 1 block, tall. And so one of the first considerations is, does that need to be expanded? Do we need to go out to 14th Street? Do we need to go down to 10th? Does it need to go up to College and down to Applegate? And does it need to go to the, half a block south of Applegate? What is that downtown core? 1, and then 2, what allowed uses do you allow in that downtown core, right? What goes in the C1? Do you want drive-through restaurants? Do you want the McDonald's and the Burger Kings out? Do you want that in your downtown core? Or do you want it to be more pedestrian centric, where you expect people are going to park and they're going to go out and they're going to walk around, not walk through the drive-through. They're going to go out and walk to all these retail businesses, right? So different setups. It's not that we don't want the drive-through banks and the drive-through, food places and stuff. It's just, do we want them in that downtown core? When you go to downtown Portland, you're not looking for a Dairy Queen to drive through, right? When you go to downtown Portland or downtown anywhere, you're going to be out, you're going to park, you're going to go and sit down and eat somewhere because it's downtown, right? The drive-throughs are out in the C2 and the more general commercial areas where it's a little more friendly for vehicle traffic, whatever. That's all based on our development code on what is allowed to develop in that C1 core. And it takes time, right? Just because you say, okay, no more, we'll just use the drive-through because I'm on that. No more drive-through in the downtown core, which is already a provision, by the way. It's already in there. It's going to take years before that happens, right? Because we already have drive-throughs in the downtown core. Citizens Bank is there. Anybody want to go tell Citizens Bank they have to move because we don't allow drive-throughs anymore? No. So it's it's non-conforming. It's already there. It's already established. But if and when Citizens Bank were to ever shut down and something were to come in there, they can't replace the drive-through, right? Like, well, we don't allow the drive-throughs anymore. So now it's going to have to, that new tenant coming in there is going to have to adhere to those new, more pedestrian scale downtown standards that the city's adopted. And that's just going to take time. It just takes time for those to roll over. But if you don't put those provisions in place, then it will never change, right? Then you just get this hodgepodge. Commissioner Hunsaker saying, you just kind of any little business can hop in there and it doesn't matter what they're doing. They could be selling automobiles on one and have a huge parking lot, and right next to that you got a little attorney's shop that's, selling us, small office and has people come and going all the time, just very different uses right next to each other. That's what your zoning and a lot of uses kind of helps siphon that out a little bit better. So we'll be looking at those. And so, again, I think this is helpful just to kind of have in mind that, so as we start looking at code and we start looking at zoning, hopefully some of these things kind of percolate back up to mind again. And we'll talk about, remember the area-wide plan, or remember we were looking at that and had a discussion about that. And if this is the type of development we want to have, what provisions do we need to have in the code that, what do we need to adopt to not allow certain things, or to make sure we encourage other things to come in. But at the end of the day, it's not going to be the city that's developing this, right? The city's role, your role, is to help put policies in place that are going to allow for the private development of these things to occur naturally, right? To be driven by the market, but encouraged or discouraged by policy.
Okay. Good for tonight on that.
I'm good, unless there's other questions, I'm happy to.
Commissioner Bernadine.
This is more of a comment, but I really loved the photos on 26 and 27, the aerial photos downtown, which I can't stop looking at. You can see my house. But it's also, it's just a very cool way to very quickly get a sense and to see. I mean, this is obviously a vantage point, which unless you have a drone, you probably haven't seen before. And I also find it very notable that this gives you a good look at the tree cover. And I find it very interesting that the place where there is by far the fewest trees and by far the most gaps and the most open lots and space is exactly our downtown area.
The most unappealing.
Exactly, the single most unattractive place on these 2 pages is our most important commercial area. So, and I get that the whole downtown streetscapes project is all about fixing that, which is going to be fantastic because we've got a lot to do.
Yeah, we'll see a lot of improvement with the uniform street trees coming in, the landscaped areas. That will help a lot. But it's not going to be a forest, right? It's still downtown, a lot of businesses, hopefully a lot more people for that space, but there's a balance with street trees and getting as much of the landscaping in as possible. I think the streetscape project does a good job of that. Again, this is a state highway going through the middle of a downtown. So there's going to be streets, there's going to be asphalt, there's going to be concrete. We're just trying to soften it as much as we can with the landscaping.
Oh, it's interesting. This photo is from when there were trees in the median. I just noticed that.
Yeah, it's a little older.
Well,
I have a,
the wings thing is there too.
Mhm.
a comment.
Yeah, Joseph.
Yeah, so I was kind of debating whether or not to share this or not, but I feel like it kind of provides a little bit of context for some things, and it might be a possible way for the city to get some funding for some of these larger projects like this. So I don't have a lot of experience with building except for sitting on the planning commission and the building project that my family is doing on 19th Street. But it's been kind of interesting. And one of the things that I've come to realize is that for anybody that wants to build anything, through good motives or evil, there's kind of a large and frightening array of government organizations with sometimes conflicting demands that are all kind of waiting on each other. And also each one has their own process and their own fees. And sometimes like one organization, a county or the state might depend on something from the city, which might depend on something else from a study from the Army Corps of Engineers. It's all just very difficult and expensive. And it's understandable and maybe even correct to say, well, you know, if you want to develop something, it's going to be expensive and you just got to find a way. But sometimes there ends up being a large amount of money that's wasted that doesn't actually help anybody or go to, you know, like, for example, in this case, the city. And the case in point, and this is kind of coming kind of secondhand because I'm not directly as involved as some members of my family of this. Trust me, there's a point to this. We after about 4 years of this particular project getting tied up mostly with the Department of State Lands, we finally got a green light. We broke ground. whenever it was last year. And the project rolled around for a couple of months. And if you drove past it, you would notice after about the month or two that just all traffic ceased. The gate was locked and nothing happened for a while. And apparently what happened was the county had a committee. It was like a ADA committee or something. And they looked at it and they said, we don't like the width of your roads. We don't like that they're, I'm going to say like 100 feet. They need to be 75 feet or something like that. So the engineers had to go through and re-engineer everything. And out of the 60, there's like 65 sheets of plans. They had to re-engineer 63 of them. And the process took a very long time, like 3 months. And in the meantime, our excavation company that was planning on spending that time excavating didn't have any work for their crews. They had to go find work elsewhere. And so once we came back to the table 3 months later, we had to get the job rebid. This cost us $400,000. And then when we finally went back to the county, they said, oh, we disbanded that committee. So it was $400,000 that we didn't get to keep. The city of Philomath didn't get to keep, and it didn't do any good for anybody. And the reason I'm mentioning all this isn't just to gripe at somebody, because this is our own personal problem and we're dealing with it. It's because if a developer had a desirable development, whatever it is that the city is looking for, maybe it's bakeries or, you know, maybe a grocery store or something like that. If there was any way that the city could provide some sort of, you know, assurance to the developer that they would take point on any legal issues or something like this, I feel like a lot of people would be willing to pay a pretty hefty premium. Like it's almost like buying protection, right? You pay 10% extra, but it means no one's going to break your windows at night. This idea probably, you know, has a lot of challenges because it involved the city taking on some risk. I don't know of anybody else doing it. I've never heard of anybody else doing something like this, but I'm pretty sure that if, you know, a company wanted to build a $2.5 million store, they'd happy to pay the city or, you know, $250,000 to essentially shepherd the project, take point with the government agencies. Because the one thing I've learned is that cities have an enormous amount of clout. They represent a group of people that are well represented, they're voters, and they're considered altruistic. They're kind of acting in everybody's best interest. And so if the city wants something done, they can get it done. And I look at this brownfield site in the heart of Philomath as kind of a good example, because a lot of people looked at that property and didn't buy it because you're basically, the EPA, it feels like, is after you if you have a site that's contaminated. They're not after you, they're just after trying to clean up the ground. It's understandable. When the city buys it, now the city is working in everybody's best interests, and there are programs, and we have this great program here to get it cleaned up. But I'm just saying it's a lot easier for cities to do things than for individuals to do things, and there might be a way to capitalize on that.
Councilor Causey.
I'm just curious, Joseph, did your family contact the county commissioners?
Yeah, we've had, I have, like I said, I've kind of have a lot of the details secondhand. I'm sure they did. They're pretty good about calling anybody and everybody. But if there are any specific questions about that, I'd be happy to, you know, answer them kind of offline or whatever. I wasn't trying to take up a lot of, you know, public time with my personal sorrows, but it's one small example in kind of an ongoing 5-year saga of just how really hard it is to build anything.
No, I don't think the city could ever take responsibility for what another government entity might do, but you know, we do have a county commissioner that is assigned to work with us.
The whole point of having public giving counties and other jurisdictions a say or in a development is to get that sort of thing figured out up front, not after the thing has been approved by the city.
Right.
So if Joseph is understanding that correctly, that shouldn't have never happened.
Mm-hmm.
Never.
The problem is that developers are kind of assumed to be evil. And I don't really blame anybody, because a lot of times what we see in terms of development really is not in anybody's best interest but the developer. They're there to make money, and a lot of times they don't really care, you know, who gets hurt in the process. And I'm not saying there is a solution there, but I think of things like, you know, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac, they're kind of run by the government, and yet they're sort of businesses. If there was ever a way for I know the city has entities that buy things and conduct business. If, for example, I wanted to build a grocery store, let's say it's a $2 million grocery store, or $3 million grocery store. If I made up the plans and the city and everybody in Philomath said, yeah, that looks amazing. And then in an imaginary world, let's say the city owned a company, a wholly publicly owned company. And that company said, we will build your $2.5 million grocery store for $2.5 million, and we'll keep anything that's left over, or 2.75 or 3 or something like that. It would be really easy for me as a business owner to say, okay, I'm now stepping back. I'm hands off. I don't have any control of the project. You guys build it the way you want to build it. And if there's any money left over, you keep it, or you keep the fee or commission or something like that. And then once it's all done, I will contract to buy that grocery store from you with bank supplied funds or something at the end of the project.
Yeah, my experience is it would be $2.4 million because we're going to pay prevailing wage. We're going to pay a premium because we are the government and everybody thinks the government's got deep pockets. And so the price goes up. And yeah, my experience isn't, I understand the sentiment that, you know, something like, I completely agree with you on 14th and Main. I don't think anybody was going to buy that property. And in fact, history shows us that in 20 years, nobody touched that property because of the uncertainty with the environmental hazards that were there and the cleanup. And I argued to the city council that if the city council or the city didn't purchase that property, nobody would, and it would never develop because of the uncertainties. The city was in the best position to move in, purchase that property, do the cleanup, and either utilize it or sell it or do something. And so that's what we did. You know, another enterprise that you're talking about, again, I think there's a lot of capacity for public-private partnerships where maybe the city becomes a partner in the endeavor. But I do think when the city alone goes out for things, we tend to pay more. In my experience with construction projects, street projects, those types of things, we end up paying a little bit more because we get charged more up front. We end up having to pay the prevailing wage to get it constructed. And it just ends up costing more. I think the private sector tends to do a little bit better job of wheeling and dealing, not having to go out for multiple bids, not, you know, all of those other provisions that the government has to do that you don't have to do when you're private. You know, but I do think there's room for public-private partnerships where if the city's at the table as a partner for like the grocery store scenario you provide, maybe that gives some leverage and we get a little bit better cooperation up front from the county or from the state on some of those things, where at least we're at the table and we're a player, and maybe that has a little more influence. I don't disagree with that aspect of it.
Commissioner Yoder.
Back to this pamphlet, is the planning commission as a body going to be going over this again, or is this a pretty much FYI for us?
I think my vision was more of a FYI, make sure you had a copy, know that the city council is going to be looking at specifics. They'll probably be directing specifics your way. Staff will probably be bringing some specifics here, especially when we're talking about things that correlate with the Main Street plan on, you know, parking provisions and zone changes, allowed uses, all those types of things. So mostly you just want to be aware that it had been out there. I think there's some really cool ideas in here. If there's anything that you wanted to get behind and really start pushing, and you wanted to, you know, inform the city council that, hey, the planning commission feels really strongly about something in here, that'd be wholly appropriate as well. But yeah, at this point, it's just informational.
So you're saying that, say I really like something in here, seems like I would be going in front of the council as a citizen, other than obviously I can't a body. And I don't know if it would be appropriate to bring something up as a body to take to city council. Like we have, our agendas usually are pretty full.
Well, this fall, we've got scheduled to do a bunch of work on the zoning and some of the code language. I think there's some very specific stuff that is going to be our job to process.
Okay.
If I could suggest, I think if there were something that one or more members of the planning commission are interested in pursuing, I would encourage you to discuss it as a body and bring it to the council as a body. Just stepping back from this for a moment, I found it to be very helpful because I thought that it actually consolidated a lot of the other plans that are out there, the comprehensive plan and the this plan and the that plan. I found it very helpful and well done consolidating document. And I would say there was pushback at the council to do a broader survey on what's to be done with 14th and Main. And I would also say, not speaking for the council as a whole, but I kind of pushed back on Chris's statement about how many open spaces do we need, because there's only one of the spaces that does not really exist today, and that's 14th and Main. I mean, we have street events on 13th and Main, and it works well when we close the street and have a good time. I think the farmer's market works well in front of City Hall. I mean, ideally, it would extend the whole length of the City Hall to the police department and the library.
Have you ever been there at the market? You've been at the market?
I was there
Okay,
yesterday.
okay, yeah, I just find it really loud. And that's on a Sunday and there's
Oh,
less
the
traffic. Right, because of the traffic. Yeah, that's what makes it loud.
Oh, I didn't notice it.
Yeah, sometimes, I mean, if you're in a conversation, I stop. Or I ask the other person to stop, because it's like, we gotta let this truck go by. Interesting, just different perspectives.
Yeah, no, good point. But anyway, I could envision the spaces that are described in here as serving different needs. Because, a small event space behind the library could be great for children's activities. I don't see the city having a single event space. That's my opinion.
Thank you for that.
I have a question. Is there any reason why the farmer's market couldn't be held on the Festival Street, 13th Street? That would be, it would go farther away from the traffic.
I've talked to the market manager, Janelle. They're really interested. Sunday afternoon, you're getting a lot of traffic coming back from the coast. So a lot of the intent was to catch that traffic coming back through town. So there was an effort to try to stay on Applegate Street. But it's what you do with the market. Is the market for people that live in town where it's convenient and quiet and, a nice place where they can go, or is the market need to be on the highway? So you're catching everybody coming through town and then it's a little bit louder, but you're catching more people coming through. So that's maybe a question for the manager to talk to the market folks and see what their preference is, and maybe moving things around a little bit. But the 13th Street site has been talked about, and they've always shied away from it because they didn't feel like there was enough access from people coming home on Sunday afternoon.
One of
We should,
the major concerns for the farmer's market is that where they are, they get access to the library restrooms.
That's true. That's helpful.
City provides that.
Yeah.
Big benefit.
That's true.
Renting porta pots is real expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And gross.
And cross, yeah.
Joseph, did you have something?
I was just thinking, I've seen a lot of times in business, people make assumptions about things and then make big decisions based on those assumptions. And it doesn't necessarily mean an assumption is bad. A lot of times assumptions are good. In this particular case, the assumption is that we're getting a lot of traffic from people coming back from the coast. And it would just be really educational to figure out a way to measure that. If we could actually say, like, quantify how many people are actually coming from the coast that would not stop if it wasn't on the eastbound side of town. Because if it turns out that the number's 2, like we would lose 2 visitors, suddenly that reason goes away. And, we're open to picking a different venue. We might be able to figure out a way to solve the restroom problem. For me personally, when I go to the farmer's market in Corvallis, it's kind of a festive sort of thing, but it's not trafficy. It's quiet, right? You're walking in kind of that cobblestone thing on First Street. There's trees and grass nearby. The kids can kind of run around and play, and it's relaxing. It's like a fun environment. When I go to see the farmer's market in Philomath, one is very aware that one is standing in a parking lot next to a lot of traffic, And for me, the biggest reason for the Philomath Farmers Market being less enjoyable is purely the location next to the road in a parking lot. So maybe there's a way to kind of quantify that fear that we would lose out on traffic and see if it's true. If it is true, and we're getting a lot of people from the coast, then I guess it is what it is. But sometimes these things don't actually turn out to be the way we thought they were.
Yeah, it's all good discussion. I guess the summary of this project a little bit is, the farmer's market has a director, and we can talk to the director, and I talk to the director at least monthly on all kinds of different things, and all I'm just doing is reporting back what she's told me, and I assume she's talking to her folks, and the city doesn't really have a lot of control, and that's really this document is. We really don't have a lot of things in here we can control. We can try to set the table, but we don't choose the food or the place settings, and a lot of times we don't even get invite who's coming to dinner, right? Set the table and hope for the best in a lot of cases. But I still think there's an important role the city has of setting the table, right? So we do need to do what we can do, but it is going to be up to the farmer's market, unless the city's going to run the farmer's market, which we don't have the capacity to do. It's going to be up to the farmer's market to decide where they want to go. We can help provide a space and say, what would you think about this space? But at the end of the day, if like, yeah, we don't like that space, we like the traffic, we're not going to change their mind, right? And so there's only something we could do. There's other people involved, but it's still good for community conversation.
We all know this isn't your fault, Chris. Nobody's pointing a finger at you. You got to understand, this is kind of hey, we love Philomath, and we want to make Philomath beautiful club, and we're not allowed to see each other except for in these meetings. So it all comes out right here.
Yeah, we can't talk at any other time.
No, I'm sorry if that came out defensive. It wasn't meant to be. I share in the frustration because I see things as well that I could see where it could improve it. But it's like, well, unless I'm going to do it, and we've had this, unless I'm going to buy that property, I don't really get to tell that neighbor what they're going to do with their property, right? Unless I'm going to buy the field, I don't get to tell people they can't develop their field. Unless I'm going to run the farmer's market, I don't get to tell the market how they're going to run it, right? So I share in the frustrations, I guess, sometimes, because you do see areas for improvement. If I could do all of these projects in here, there's probably most of them I would do. I think a lot of these are great ideas. Some not so much, but a lot of these I would do. It's just setting priorities and then getting, other people involved. And that's one thing about public entity is that you listen to all voices, and it's really hard to get consensus around any one topic. You're always going to have somebody, usually a neighbor, that's opposed to a really, really good idea. And, it's going to take more than that one person to kind of overcome and say, well, we understand that this may not be what's best for you, but it's what's best for everybody else. Sorry, we're going to go there. That's an uncomfortable position to put people in, but as a planning commissioner, as a city council, you end up having to make those decisions more often than you wish you had to. As a city administrator, city manager, I have to make those recommendations more often than I wish I did. It's like, yeah, this really stinks for this property owner. This really stinks for the street, but I believe it's for the betterment of this community. So here's my recommendation. And, it's never enjoyable to do because you don't like anybody being upset or feeling like they got their property devalued or they weren't listened to. For every one of these projects in here that you like, there's somebody, I guarantee there's somebody who doesn't like it because it affects them negatively, one way or another. So just have to keep that balance in mind. So that was all I had. Thank you. We went a little longer than I wanted, but good questions, good conversation, and we'll look for aspects of this to come back throughout the next several years, probably.
Okay. So our next meeting is scheduled for July 18th at 6 p.m. And was something sent out with a new list of, we'll get to that next, with a new list of what our schedule is and what we're planning to do on those dates?
No, Ruth reminded me I hadn't done that. I think we revised, we just bumped one thing down. Okay. This wasn't supposed to come up, but whatever was for today, we had the hearing.
Urbanization.
Which one?
Urbanization.
Yeah, conversation urbanization, and Pat's not there yet. And so we had an opportunity in the meeting tonight, so I brought this in. I will get a revised schedule out this week. We'll get that done.
Do you know what we're going to try to hit on the 18th?
The 18th is going to be. Yeah, thank you. Oh, that's what was on for today, was the FEMA. So we've got some floodplain management code language that we need to revise. I was hoping to do that today instead of this. I didn't have time to get it all wrapped up, and so that will be at your next meeting in July. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a code audit essentially of our floodplain special hazard area in the code. So it'll be looking at some pretty specific code language revisions from FEMA that Pat's been working with the consultant on.
Thank you. So you want to give an update, or we have an update in writing? I guess we shouldn't, I wouldn't like you to read it. but
Any
Does
questions?
anybody have any questions? Councilor
Are
Dawson?
there any limitations in our code relative to tattoo shops?
No.
Well, people would come to.
Would anyone like to see any limitations?
Like how many, or if they're
Where
allowed?
they can be located?
Commissioner Sullivan?
I don't have anything necessarily against tattoo shops, but I was looking at the Philomath Municipal Code last night, and I found some clauses in there that were talking about. I mean, I think the way the language was phrased, I think they were written several decades ago, but they were talking about wholesome businesses or unwholesome businesses, and they gave some examples, and I think that's kind of where my mind jumps when you say tattoo shops.
I think a lot of people would disagree, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of people
No.
love them.
I'm not judging for or against tattoo shops. I know and love many people with tattoos, and I'm not saying we should or shouldn't have them. I'm just saying there is a section of code that appears to be talking about. I forget if I don't think they mentioned the word tattoo, but you would have to, when you read it, let me find it.
Oh. Blue laws.
All right.
Yeah, I had two really quick questions. And I feel like you answered this before, but what happened to the proposed business on South 7th? The ATV building thing?
Change of plans, he put it up for sale. I don't know much more than that.
Okay, so
Just
that's
a
just not
personal
happening, and it's
thing,
just still
yeah.
waiting.
Yep.
Okay, and then my other one was Pippa Lane between 10th and 11th. I was walking by there the other day and I couldn't help notice there doesn't appear to be any street trees whatsoever or any kind of landscaping.
The street trees go in with the lots as they're developed.
Uh-huh.
I'll have to look specifically. I know there's like a couple of the duplexes are still going in. You're talking the houses on the north side. I'll have to look.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
There was one tree, I saw one tree on that block. There are probably 4 or 5 houses now, and then the lots on either end.
Let me look.
Okay.
Yeah, let me look. I have some speculations, but I'll keep them to myself.
Okay.
So that brings up a good point. You know, when it comes to conditions of approval of developers, how, other than like, you know, Jim just bringing something like that up, how do we stay on top of whether or not they're actually meeting the conditions of approval without spending so much staff time checking absolutely everything? I mean, do you go by the input of people, citizens saying, you know, this isn't done, it's supposed to be done, it was a condition of approval?
No, it's reviewed by Pat before they get certificate of occupancy. He does go back through all the conditions and make sure that everything's been done before they get occupancy.
Hmm.
So there's times where, you know, if they've got a sidewalk to put in, it's November, sometimes they'll say, okay, we'll let you move into your house, but you gotta put the sidewalk in within the next 6 months or something like that. So we'll sometimes give allowances there due to weather, or if they can't get supplies in or something, but that's not very often. We usually try to get everything done, all of that work done before we let them move into the house or move into the business, whatever the case might be.
I found the section.
Go ahead.
Go
It
ahead.
doesn't mention tattoo parlors, but it's in the section 9.10.080 restricted activities. And it talks about occult arts, fortune tellers, games of amusement, billiards, pool, and electronic amusement devices. And it says they're all kind of restricted in different ways.
Are you serious?
Billiards?
Billiards? What?
Billiards.
Holy down.
That's what I said. Like, I'm not against tattoo parlors, but there's some language in here that, you know, I think was written a little while ago.
We got trouble.
Because
Right here.
I don't know how many of you guys have seen, what is it, The Music Man? We Got Trouble up here in River City.
Oh, River City.
That starts with P and rhymes with
We dig,
Something to you.
Joseph, we digress.
What was the code number?
it was 9.10.080 restricted activities.
Okay.
It'd be good if we could get some fortune tellers in here, liven the place up a bit.
Kids out there with their.
We could be like a hot spot of fortune telling.
But they'd see us coming, so, you know. I digress. I'm sorry.
Just a question, when do you think we'll see Pat?
He'll be here next month.
Oh,
He's overseeing Philomath flood plague and stuff.
but I mean, so he's getting around all right, or pretty much?
Yeah, he's back in the office.
Oh,
pretty much
I
2 to
didn't
3
know,
days a week.
I didn't know that, okay.
He's not 100%, but he's doing good. Work-wise, he's 100%. Physically, still doing rehab and stuff. No, he's doing good.
You'll be able to beat him in a foot race for a long time.
I really like your summaries of the number of permits and things in solar.
Ruth pulled all that together, so yeah.
Thanks, Ruth.
Yeah.
Fascinating that there's been that many solar arrays put on it.
You know, I have felt like I've just been doing solar arrays left and right, and they're a wide variety of companies.
What do you think is the,
I have a strong need to go delve into it and see if I'm missing out on some governmental money for my solar array.
It's a good deal.
I've never seen that many.
I have a relative who has new ones and they're always telling us about, as soon as the sun gets bright enough, they're not paying for electricity anymore and they have zero
It's
bill
true.
for the month and yeah.
You can't shut them up telling you about how much money they're saving.
Right.
That's true.
I'm tempted. I just
I know.
haven't done it.
And the renewable water sources.
Yes.
Sometimes I have more opportunity to do this than others, so. you know, enjoy that one.
Yeah,
okay,
great.
thank you, you appreciate
There's
it.
a short-
Counselor Cosby.
Just a question based on this summary, would you say our whole building has slowed down
Oh, substantially.
since?
Substantially.
So Cactus Creek, Cactus Estates we haven't heard about it for a while.
We've not heard back.
Okay.
Okay.
You know, we're back on a par, 10 years ago on our single family.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank
Meeting
you.
adjourned.
Oh my God, it's